Welcome to Heart of Terra Stories. Please subscribe to my channel. Your one click means the world to me. The air between them didn't just vibrate, it hummed with the frequency of a dying star. Kalen reached out, his fingers stopping a breath away from the iridescent curve of Alara's cheek. Her crystalline skin pulsed with starlight, a rhythmic violet glow that quickened as his hand drew near. He wasn't supposed to touch her. He wasn't even supposed to look at her without 3 layers of polarized glass and a decade of diplomatic training between them. But the training had failed the moment she stepped onto the bridge, and now the silence of the neutral moon felt like a physical weight pressing them together. It turned out that the Aurelian was a lonely place to be a commander. For months, Kalen Vance had spent his hours staring into the shifting gases of the nebula fringe, watching the way the light bent around the Valerian hegemony's borders. The Valerians were a mystery wrapped in geometry, stoic, beautiful, and utterly cold. Or so the United Earth Command said. They described the hegemony as a wall of glass, transparent but impenetrable. Then came the signal. It wasn't the standard burst of binary or a formal invitation through the usual channels. It was a high-frequency resonance, a sound that felt like silver tears shed in the wake of a haunting melody. It was Sovereign Ilara, requesting a parley on Aethelgard. When her shuttle docked, Kalen had expected a wall of ice. Instead, he found a creature of light. Her body was a lattice of translucent minerals, shifting from deep indigo to pale frost as she moved. She didn't speak with lungs or vocal cords. She spoke through the refraction of light within her own frame. And yet, she stood there in the center of his briefing room, looking at the scuffed metal floors and the flickering holographic displays with a curiosity that felt dangerously human. The tour of the ship was supposed to be a formality. It was a way to show strength, to demonstrate the raw power of Earth's engineering. But as they walked the narrow corridors, Kalen found himself trailing off mid-sentence. He was explaining the efficiency of the fusion drive, but he was watching the way her internal light dimmed when they passed the cold utilitarian crew quarters. Ironically, the most advanced ship in the fleet felt like a cage when compared to her. He saw her pause by a small viewport, her gaze fixed on the nebula outside. Her skin flickered a soft, uncertain amber. In that moment, the rigid protocols felt like a lead weight in his chest. He was supposed to discuss trade routes and mineral rights. He was supposed to remain the stoic face of humanity. But he looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that the Valerians weren't cold. They were just waiting for a language they understood. He took a step toward her, his heart thudding against his ribs like a trapped bird. The sensors in the room began to whine, picking up the spike in his adrenaline. He knew the guards were watching through the feed. He knew his career was likely ending in the next 10 seconds. But the truth was, he couldn't keep the words back anymore. He was about to trade rigid protocols for the messy truth of a human heart. Kalen stood in the center of the observation deck, the sensors overhead wailing a low-frequency warning as his heart rate climbed. Ilara turned away from the nebula, her crystalline form shifting into a sharp, jagged violet. The air between them tasted of static and old copper. This was the moment the manual warned about, the threshold where a single misplaced word could trigger a planetary kinetic strike. But the words didn't feel like a mistake. They felt like an inevitability. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," Kalen said. His voice was raw, stripping away the polished layers of a commander's authority. "Not just the light, not just the symmetry. It's the way you look at the stars like you're mourning them." The silence that followed was absolute. On the bridge, tactical displays surely turned red. In the Valerian hegemony, such a blunt, unvarnished declaration of personal observation was unheard of. It was more than a breach of protocol. It was the terrifying weight of an accidental marriage proposal, in their culture a total soul-bearing, that left no room for retreat. Alara's light didn't just flicker, it stalled. A deep, hollow pulse radiated from her chest, a resonance so pure it vibrated the marrow in Kalen's bones. Her hand, translucent and cold as glacial ice, finally closed the gap. When her fingers brushed his palm, a jolt of thermal energy surged through him. It wasn't a burn, it was a connection, a frantic exchange of data and heat. She looked at him, her internal geometry realigning until she glowed with a soft, steady white light he had never seen in the archives. Honesty, she pulsed, the translation appearing on his HUD with a strange poetic lag. It is a jagged gift. My people hide behind the refraction of logic. We calculate the cost of every shadow. But you simply bleed the truth. The tension that had defined 2 centuries of border skirmishes didn't snap. It dissolved. In the days that followed, the incident on the Aurelian became the blueprint for a new reality. The hegemony didn't retreat into their crystalline towers. Instead, they leaned into the friction. They adopted a trial of radical honesty, a terrifying and brilliant social experiment where the hidden agendas of empires were traded for the blunt, messy transparency Kalen had sparked in a moment of weakness. As the Aurelian pulled away from the neutral moon, Kalen sat in his quarters, watching a small, glowing shard Alara had left behind. It hummed with a low, comforting frequency. Diplomacy was no longer a game of chess played with hidden pieces. It was a conversation, sometimes painful and often clumsy, but finally real. Truth is, the universe didn't need more treaties. It just needed someone brave enough to stop pretending they weren't amazed by the person standing across from them. Kalen looked back at the nebula, no longer a barrier, but a bridge, and for the first time in his life, the silence of space didn't feel like an ending. It felt like an invitation.